Hey guys, my name's Steph, I'm Botanist Cool, and today we're pulling a monster hunter on D&D. As always guys, a huge thank you for supporting me with the Quest Helper series. For people who are watching the Quest Helper series for the first time today, Quest Helper is all about talking about the creativity, the positivity, and the minutia of D&D in a fun way that is accessible to both new players and veterans. I want to make sure that you all have a lot of stuff to use for your D&D campaigns, so if you like anything you see in the video, take a look at the description down below. I'll have a link to my Google Doc where you could use anything I talk about and provide stats for, etc, etc. If you like that, make sure to hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, the like button, all that fancy YouTube jargon, but let's get on into the subject for today. As I mentioned before, we're pulling a monster hunter on D&D 5e by turning the monsters and creatures that we fight in our encounters into weapons, armors, items, and more. This is an option I really enjoy giving to my players because it heightens the immersion of the world while also allowing them to be more creative with what they're given for loot. So if you're thinking about a traditional loot system, if you defeat a giant crab, you might get 50 gold pieces and something special, right? And that's not a bad system, especially for more traditional tabletop RPG players and people who just want a simpler system. That is completely valid. For some parties though, immersion is key, and deep immersion is a lot more fun. So having the party use their survival skills, an example, to dismantle the crab and get crab meat, crab claws, and a bunch of like crab shell plating will allow them to do a lot more things with that loot than just having the money. They could actually start bartering off that crab meat for maybe 75 gold pieces. They could use that 75 gold pieces, then commission a smith to make a really cool crab claw spear and a really cool crab shell shield. God, the words are really confusing. It's like a tongue twister. Crab shell shield. I nailed it. There we go. There we go. Crab shell shield. I've retaken this take like 7 times now because I cannot get that phrase right, but you get my point either way, right? Having the opportunity to dismantle a creature and use its body parts to make really cool gear and armor allows you to really customize your own experience and even expand upon your character in its own way. So I really like giving this as an option to my players. They don't always have to take it. They don't always need to do that. They could go for a traditional route, or they could go for a dismantling route and a more immersive route. It depends on the players and the party themselves. So make sure you talk about your players and see if this is something they're interested in before you actually do it. So before I give you guys the items, let me explain how I actually go through with this process. First and foremost, whenever they defeat an enemy, whether it be a wolf, a boar, a giant eel, manta rays, sharks, etc., I always have them roll a survival roll to determine whether or not they can actually dismantle the creature effectively. Let me give you an example. Let's say they're fighting a boar and they kill a boar, right? At this point in time, they may have stabbed it, they may have flown some, spells at it. It might be quite damaged. So a high survival roll might net the players high quality meat, some good fur to use for future works, and 2 tusks that are strong and ready to be used for whatever they want to use them for. But if they roll low, they might get really tattered pelts that cannot be used for anything, and some meat here and there to eat. Maybe not high quality meat, but just vaguely, here you go, you got some meat, put it on the barbecue, you're not going hungry tonight kind of deal. That's what I will do first. The survival roll is quite important for this specific case scenario. Now, if they do have tools like a butcher's kit or something like that, I don't think that's actually a thing in D&D 5e, but if you decided to make that a homebrew thing, then maybe you can make them roll on that instead, but still, that's what I would personally do. After that, if they say, hey, I want to take those boar's tusks and turn them into arrows, cool. You could have them roll it for tinkering tools, for word-working tools, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of tools that your players actually get based upon their backgrounds and their classes that you could say, roll with that tool add a modifier. As an example, if you're just kind of bashing things together, making an axe, maybe it's strength. But if you want to make arrows, it's dexterity. Make sure that it stays on nice and tight, and see the result. If the result is really high, maybe give them a little bonus, a +1. Or if the result's really low, it doesn't work, the item falls apart, and maybe they break the resource they had. It all depends on you, and all depends on the situation and how it's going to play out. Now, just as a quick note, whenever my players make an item, if they make it really well, I like giving them a +1 to that weapon. I know typically +1, +2, +3 weapons are all magical, and I am not the biggest fan of this rule personally. I typically think that as long as it's really well made, it should get a +1, kind of like how they did it in Pathfinder 1st edition, if I remember correctly. And the +1 weapon has the opportunity to be enchanted in the future, but doesn't necessarily need to be enchanted. And I still count it as a magical weapon for attacks and stuff like that. It's just one way that I really reward my players for having a unique item that they have crafted themselves, and that's what I want to do. So those are kind of my rules for it. You don't need to use those rules. You can think of any other way to do it. That's just kind of how I do it, and how it's going to kind of explain the weapons and items and armors I'm making in this video. That way you guys kind of know where my thought process is at. A survival roll to determine what they get, a toolkit roll to see what they can accomplish, and applying a modifier or a lack of a modifier depending on their role. And of course, if you want, they could go to a smithy or a town shop and have it commissioned as well. So I'm back on the right side of the screen, and that means I'm going to show you guys some items you could use in your game. We're focusing on the forest biome today, primarily because when I asked my Twitch subscribers what they wanted to see, they all voted on the forest. So let's get right onto it and talk about some forest biome items you can make. First and foremost, we're talking about the Daggers of Venom. So let's just read straight down this list and talk about it, and I'll tell you some of my opinions of it in the future. The Daggers of Venom are +1 daggers with 1d4 +1 piercing or slashing damage with 1d6 poison damage that is conditional. The Daggers of Venom were made from the fangs of a giant spider. The daggers have a small hole in the tip of the blade where poison will inject itself into the victim. The blades do 1d4 piercing or slashing damage on a successful hit and 1d6 poison damage with a constitution DC of 13. If the target succeeds, it takes half poison damage. It can be made from dismantling a giant spider with survival rolls and a check from a proper toolset such as tinkerers, smiths, or woodcarvers. Now, first and foremost, those are just the toolsets I personally recommend. You and your party might find a completely different way to do it, and that is a-okay. Have fun and go for it. That being said, now let's talk about the weapon. Now, the weapon itself, I kind of have a wicked and horrible idea of this thing in terms of the poison itself. This is not a magical weapon. This is a weapon that your party made and that your players actually have to upkeep, right? Which means the poison might run out. And if that happens, your players have to refill the poison. So either they have to hunt more spiders down or they have to get other forms of poison. Let's say your party uses this dagger for 2 or 3 games and you go, all right, it's been a few games, maybe it's been like 10 successful hits, and now the poison from it's gone. You have to refill the poison. They can then choose any other kind of poison. Maybe they have a paralyzing agent they got from a local plant. Maybe they have a just a normal, like really hard hitting poison. Maybe they have something that makes people fall asleep, right? They could have so many different kinds of poisons put into this weapon that the DC 13 isn't necessarily going to be a permanent thing, but rather the starting thing. At least that's how I would play it. If my players were like, hey, listen, I want to make a paralytic out of some plants, I go for it, roll survival, and use your alchemist kit and go crazy with it. And then they roll, it's like, oh yeah, DC 14, you can now put this paralyzing agent into this dagger. Think about it like Monster Hunter with the coatings or the specialized bullets and stuff, right? When you have a paralyzing coating, it could possibly inflict the paralyzing or the stun effect or the immobile effect or whatever effect would be applicable to the monster or enemy you're fighting. It can really add a lot of diversity and a lot of strategy to your players who might be thinking more along the lines of, I got a really cool weapon that allows me to administer a poison. How can I do this? Or, if for some reason you are unable to administer a health potion to your player, right? Let's say you as a player, like, I need to give a health potion to someone. They can't drink it because they're unconscious or whatever, right? There's a restriction, right? For whatever reason, they cannot drink the potion. Just pour the potion into the dagger. And then you got like a needle, right? You can administer medicine that way, or an antitoxin that way. There's a lot of things you can kind of do to make it funny like that. I know I once had a friend who did an alchemist gunslinger who had healing bullets. It was wild, but there's a lot of things you could do with this, including administering drugs, both helpful and harmful, to enemies and fellow players, or medications or whatever. It can be wild. Have fun with it. Go crazy. That's what I think is kind of special about this weapon in particular. So go nuts and see what you guys can really create out of this, and see if you guys can have some fond memories of this. It's a simple weapon, but I do think it is a very useful weapon. Now, the great thing about D&D 5e and all the creatures you will face in the game is that they all have a lot of different abilities and a lot of different specialties. As an example, the Barghest is a wolf-like creature that turns into a goblinoid with polymorphing. You could actually have an entire tribe of goblinoids that are actually Barghest, waiting to trap some unexpected adventurers and get a meal out of them, right? That's not impossible. You could have a lot of fun with that, and as such, I decided to base this item around the Barghest. It's called the Cloak of the Barghest. Very simply put, let's go down and read this nice and quick. It gives a conditional +5 to stealth. The Cloak of the Barghest is a strong, furry, and slightly uncomfortable cloak that is made from the skin of a slain Barghest. Though simple and rugged in design, it helps keep the wearer warm. It has the added benefit of giving a +5 to stealth rolls around goblins. It can be made by skinning a Barghest with a survival roll, and a check with a proper tool set, such as the Tinkerer's Tool, Weaver's Tool, or Leathermaker's Tools. Now, here's the thing about this, right? When you have a specialized creature, you should make the items kind of based around that specialized creature. Sometimes the creature doesn't have anything too special. It's just a big creature with big teeth and is really scary, so it just gives a really strong sword. Other times, the creature has a special ability, like the Barghest here, that's actually able to turn into a goblinoid. I didn't make the polymorph carry over for the item. You could do that if you want to. Maybe have your wizard roll and arcana roll to put in certain runes, and that way, when the cloak is made, the cloak actually gives one casting of polymorph a day when it comes to turning into a goblinoid, as an example. I like the stealth idea personally, just more do it whatever way you want, but I can see a lot of funny things coming out of this. Your players going and stealing from goblins, your players kind of trying to scout out the area, maybe find and rescue people from goblin camps. There's a lot of things they could do, and I think it's a really good item for a low level party that's still trying to work their way up. Now, this creature and this item is going to be a little different than the other ones, because it's not going to necessarily be one that you need to kill a creature for, but of course you can. It's going to be one that you might actually be able to make a really fun quest out of. There is a creature called the Cuddle. Now, what the Cuddle is a beautiful winged and feathered serpent that is lawful good in nature. I believe it's actually considered a celestial, if I remember correctly. And oftentimes you'll find tribes and small civilizations, towns, villages, etc. based around Cuddles and worshipping Cuddles, because they are just benevolent beings, and they have this great amount of wisdom and psionic powers and all that good stuff. So we've made an item out of Cuddles, and this is called the Cuddles Headpiece. I'm going to go around and I'm just going to read it real quick. The Cuddles Headpiece is a simply designed yet elegant piece of headwear that is made of silver and at least a couple feathers or scales from a Cuddle. Those who wear the headpiece have an advantage against spells that would detect their thoughts, feelings, locations, or allow others to scry on them. They can be made by obtaining a Cuddles feathers or scales, and with a check with a proper tool set, like a tinkerer's, jeweler's, or a smith's tool set. Once again, if you find another tool set that works in this exact scenario, use it, have fun. But I can think of something really cool with this, and I think that you might like this as well. Might even give you a nice little quest idea. If you go to a town that worships a Cuddle, and the Cuddle gives instructions to the elders to give you a quest, and you go on this quest and you complete this quest for the Cuddle, and then you return and the Cuddle sheds 4 or 5 feathers on you as a gift and a reward, you can now make this headpiece. You kind of make it like a Hermes like headpiece with the feathers go on the side and all that stuff. It can be really cool. Or maybe you are defending a Cuddle, but the Cuddle is eventually slain, protecting, maybe it's young, maybe a Cuddle just gave birth or something, it's protecting its young, and the Cuddle was slain, but you were able to save the child. It might not be impossible that you can then utilize some parts of the adult Cuddle's body in order to really make this item. Now, if you're an evil party, you might just want to kill the Cuddle, but if you're a good party and you think the Cuddle's beneficial, this might give you a really interesting quest line to go under, that the Cuddle sends you on a quest and then will reward you with its feathers or maybe shed scales. It's a lot of fun, in my personal opinion. That's all I've got for you guys today, and thank you very much for watching this video. If you've been inspired by this video to make new items from monsters and creatures in the D&D 5e world, leave it down below. Talk about what you like about this video and the items that are in this video, and talk about the items you want to make yourself. Or maybe there's a creature that you would love to discuss about making an item about. We could talk about that in the comments. It'd be awesome. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure to leave them down below. Hit that like button, all that good stuff. And as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. It sincerely does mean a lot to me, and I cannot wait to put out another video next week for you guys to really enjoy and sink your teeth into. Anyways, y'all stay safe, stay Botanist Cool. I'll see you next Saturday. Bye everyone.